do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
Oh, the New York Knicks. Every year they talk themselves into thinking they're going to get somebody, and every year they're disappointed. But maybe this time it's going to be different. What's up, everybody? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. Today we're going to be talking about the New York Knicks. So, where do I begin? Well, similarly to the Detroit Pistons, who I talked about in my last video, the Knicks are, they're really lacking in terms of roster strength right now. They really only have a few core players, that I think will be on the team in a couple years, and by a few I mean one, and that's RJ Barrett. He was drafted 3rd overall last year, and he had an okay rookie season. It sucks for him to be compared to guys like Ja and Zion because both of them were amazing, and him being drafted behind them at 3rd overall, he was just okay. He had flashes at points where he was, showing some of that potential that he's had, but it's kind of been known that RJ would be a little bit more of a project, and with how bad the rest of this Knicks roster is, it makes sense that he wasn't going to be amazing this year. So I'm going to hold out on, grading RJ right now. I think he played fine, but I'm going to have to see a couple more years of him before I decide where I stand on him as a player, and if I, how good I think he's going to be. So I just don't think it's fair to grade him right now. But he is, the core of this team. He's the guy that they're invested in moving forward. He was drafted high and still has quite a bit of potential left. A lot of the roster is made up of veterans, and he's one of the younger guys here. So RJ is a guy who the Knicks are going to be looking at to potentially be, one of their stars moving forward. We will just have to see how good he ends up being. Why is it that every time the Knicks get a good young player, it seems like he's immediately in trade rumors? I don't know, but that's the case here with Mitchell Robinson, who was drafted in the 2nd round a couple of years ago and has been really impressive so far, especially considering his draft spot and what he's been able to do so far in his career. He's been a bright spot for this Knicks team over the past couple of years. At that center position, he's super athletic, really, pretty good defensively, especially for a guy at his age, and is a really efficient shooter from the floor, great rim roller type guy, and he's been really good for them. So it's been surprising to me to see them kind of dangling him out in trade talks, potentially to move up in the draft. I've seen a couple of rumors there that they could use him to move up because they might not want to pay him in a couple of years, or for whatever reason they don't like him as much as you might think that they would. I don't know if any of that's going to come true, but if I was the Knicks, I would hold on to him. He's one of your only talented pieces on the roster. Him and RJ are the two guys who you feel like have at least some sort of potential to become something in the NBA. There's a few others that I'll get to later, but he is one of the most promising prospects on this roster, and so it doesn't really make sense for them to trade him unless you're getting something really good back. So for me, Mitchell Robinson, I've liked his game so far, and I would like to see him continue with the Knicks, and see what they can do with him as they continue to round out this young roster. And then you have the veterans. These are all guys who the Knicks signed last offseason, who, they signed them to big 1-year deals with either a team option for the 2nd year or non-fully guaranteed for the 2nd year. So they have outs on a lot of these guys this offseason if they don't want to bring him back. If they do, they'll likely be used as trade bait either in the offseason or around the deadline. And this is not all of them. I've put 4 of them up here. There's a couple extras as well, but you have guys like Wayne Ellington, Taj Gibson, Bobby Portis, Julius Randle, and then as well Elfrid Payton and Reggie Bullock, who are all guys who were signed to deals that they're probably not worth, but the Knicks are going to try to either flip them at some point or just cut ties and get off of that money. And, theoretically, that's a pretty good idea, to sign guys to big non-committal deals, 1-year deals with outs at some points in the contract, and potentially use them as trade bait to teams that are pushing for a title or for the playoffs that are in need of veteran help and veteran depth. They can potentially bring in some of these guys off the Knicks if the Knicks are looking to get off of these and maybe get some picks or younger pieces back in return. Theoretically, that's not a bad idea, but it only works if the players that you're signing are actually good. And I think that's the case with a couple of these guys, but a few of them I would not touch with a 10-foot pole. So Julius Randle and Bobby Portis, to an extent, are at least decent players, and both of them at only 25. They're still relatively young. They're making the most money out of any of these guys, which makes sense. Randall is a guy that you could potentially have thrown into a trade for a star or for a max level player. He can make up a lot of the difference in that salary number. Portis is a guy who could potentially, find some room on a contending team at around $15 million salary. It's not too expensive for somebody to try to bring in if they could cobble together enough salary to make it work. So those are two guys that I would expect to see moved. Portis does have a team option, so they could just choose to decline it and say goodbye to him, before a trade ever materializes. And then I also want to get into guys who maybe aren't quite worth that money and you might have a harder time trading them, and that's the other four: Gibson, Ellington, as well as Payton and Bullock. Gibson and Ellington are team options, and then Bullock and Payton are non-fully guaranteed, which basically acts as a team option. I'm not exactly sure the exact amounts that it's guaranteed for and blah, 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 whatever. That's all semantics. It'll get worked out. I would not be surprised to see all four of those players either have their option declined or be cut this offseason, because I think it's going to be pretty hard to find a trade for a lot of these guys. Maybe Taj Gibson, if you think that he can still be something for you. He's 35 years old. $10 million is not a huge salary, but it's kind of a lot for a guy like him. Elfrid Payton is also still okay. You could potentially find some room for him on your roster. Reggie Bullock at only $4 million is not too high of a number, but he's a guy who probably fits better on a veteran minimum, so you can find guys who have a similar skill set for a lot cheaper. And then Wayne Ellington is the one that really puzzles me, because he was a guy he wasn't worth that contract last year. He wasn't very good last year, and he's a guy that at $8 million, that's a lot for a 32-year-old guard who is clearly declining. Similarly to Bullock, you can get guys who do the same thing that he does for a lot cheaper on the market. So I would not be surprised to see the Knicks decline that team option and just cut ties with a lot of these guys. And, potentially if you can work out a trade for a couple of them, cool. But if not, just open up that cap space and try to find something else that you can do with it, because I just don't think it's being put to very good use with a lot of these veterans. All right, so how about that cap situation? Looking at this mess of a Knicks cap sheet, it's, I really got into a lot of it in that last segment, but they can really get rid of a lot of these guys, no questions asked, and I would not be surprised to see them move on from a lot of these players. They, really, like I mentioned earlier, the only core pieces on this roster are probably RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. They do have a little bit of other young talent in Frank Ntilikina, Dennis Smith, and Kevin Knox, all three of which have been pretty disappointing so far. Say what you want about Ntilikina's defense and his passing and all sorts of stuff, and trust me, I do like those parts of his game, but there have been a lot of struggles on the offensive end, and there's points where he looks lost out there. Similar deal with Dennis Smith, who he was good on the Mavericks and then somehow just fell off a cliff when he got to the Knicks. I don't know if the Mav stuff was just a mirage and he's never really been that good, but I'm not sure what happened to him. And if the Knicks can ever find a way to revive that guy, he might be something, but it's looking like his career is pretty much on life support. And Kevin Knox is... he's Kevin Knox. There's been lapses in effort, and there's been points where he tries and then points where he doesn't try for a stretch of 5 games, 10 games, whatever. It goes up and down, and he's a bit inconsistent offensively, defensively, all around the board. It's tough to know what to make of Kevin Knox and how much potential he has left. He's only 21 years old, so I'm not quite ready to give up on him, but maybe the Knicks are. So those are guys who, if the Knicks are looking to acquire somebody, those could potentially be throw-ins to a trade. I could see other teams out there, getting interested and potentially seeing if they can get something out of any three of those players. And they could chalk it up to, well, the Knicks have a poor player development system, and we feel like we can get something out of these guys who still have some potential and are very young, but maybe the Knicks have ruined them for good. I don't know. So I would not be surprised to see any three of those guys moved. As much as I do think the Knicks need young talent, I think for all three of those guys, it would do them good to see a change of scenery, just because there's been a lot of baggage over the past couple of years with New York, and it just might be better for them to continue their careers elsewhere. So we will just have to see what materializes with that. And then as far as free agents, nobody really of consequence. Mo Harkless is a guy who's expiring. They traded for him at the deadline. It was part of the Marcus Morris and pick swaps and all sorts of stuff going on there. He was a guy who was just brought in to fill salary, and they're not going to worry about bringing him back. He's going to go sign with a contender on a veteran minimum. Damian Dotson, who, it's weird, he's 26 years old. He hasn't been in the league that long, but I mean, we'll see what they do with him. He's been okay for them the past couple of years, but he's an into the bench guy. It's probably not too much of a consequence whether they keep him or not. And then Theo Pinson's got a team option. I mentioned all the other guys with team options are non-fully guaranteed. It's kind of in flux there. None of these guys really matter to their long-term plans, so it's just all based on trades that they might do, cap maneuverability, and depending on if they want to sign somebody else in place of all these guys. And then beyond that, it's really, that's really what there is to the roster. I do want to give some shouts to Kenny Wooten because he is a guy who I really liked in college. For whatever reason, I just always thought he was fun to watch at Oregon. And coming into the NBA, he went undrafted, spent some time in the G League, and he's now on a two-way contract with the Knicks. So it's good to see him getting a little bit of run here. Hopefully he can get in some games. I don't know why. He's just one of those weird players. Everybody's got two or three of those weird players who they always really liked for no reason. They aren't very good, but you just kind of are drawn to them for some reason. That's Kenny Wooten for me. He's just kind of a fun guy to follow. So hopefully he can turn his career into something. But that's all I have to say on that. So what would I do if I was the Knicks? Well, let me start by telling you all something that I wouldn't do. And that is breaking the bank for a big free agent. And by big free agent, I mean guys like Fred VanVleet, Montrezl Harrell, some of the other big names out there on the market. I wouldn't, if I was New York, I just would wait. I really would. And maybe that's, big one-year deals similar to what they did last offseason for actually good players, not overpaying veterans for the sake of overpaying veterans. And, taking a chance on maybe some younger players, throwing some contracts at some restricted free agents who you might be able to pry away. And really that's what I would do, is try to just accumulate young talent and build yourself into a winner and build yourself, gain yourself a little bit more respect when it comes to free agents and trying to sign players and among agents and all sorts of stuff. They did hire Leon Rose as their president of basketball operations in March, and obviously the season was suspended pretty quickly after that, so he didn't have a chance to do much with this team. But this is his first full off season. He'll really have a chance to make this what he wants to make it. So we will have to see what he decides to do with the team. He was an agent prior to taking this job, so he might have some connections in certain places, and maybe that'll line the Knicks up to be a little bit more popular on the free agent market. So that's what I would do, is if you can get some guys on big one-year deals who are actually tradable, then do that. And then throw contracts at restricted free agents who you think have some potential. Bring back most of your young guys. A lot of your young guys are under contract, but probably just bring them back. And then the other one that I do want to kind of touch on, and maybe this is weird, but I actually do not mind the idea of them trading for Chris Paul, which sounds kind of contrary to what I just said. But let me tell you why I think this is a good idea. Chris Paul can build you into at least some sort of a desirable destination, and he can help win the Knicks some respect back, because it's been year after year after year of them saying, we're going to get the big free agent, we're going to get the big free agent, we're going to trade for the star, we're going to do this. And with the exception of Carmelo Anthony, they've never been able to do it. It's always been like, oh, we're going to sign Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Nope, they went across town to Brooklyn. And this time it's like, oh, we're going to get Giannis. Oh, we're going to get Kawhi. Oh, we're going to get whoever, you know? And it's just never, ever worked out for them. So what the Knicks need to do is they need to prove to the players that they're capable of building a winning team. And that starts with bringing in a veteran who has been around the league for a long time. He's in the Players Association. He, is coming off a great year with Oklahoma City, leading them into the playoffs when nobody thought that they were capable of doing that. And yes, his contract is expensive, and yes, it cuts into your cap space, but you have so much freaking cap space. What are you going to use it on? Chris Paul. Just do it, okay? I really do think it's a good idea. You probably won't have to give up too much to do it. If it takes Ntilikina, if it takes Kevin Knox, that's fine. Don't give up Mitchell Robinson. Don't give up RJ Barrett. But if you have to give up a couple of those young guys and a pick or two, maybe put some protections on those first round picks. But try to get a deal done. And you can make salary work with Randall or Portis or any of these other veterans that I've talked about. That's not a problem. So that's one that just somehow feels correct to me. I really think they should make the move for Chris Paul. I think it makes sense for them. Do with that information what you will. But Chris Paul to the Knicks feels pretty correct. And then other than that, you have the 8th overall pick in the draft. Maybe move up if you really like somebody, but if not, there's some quality prospects there. I would caution against falling in love with one of the top prospects and losing your mind trying to trade up for them. Specifically LaMelo Ball, but even in Anthony Edwards, if he's there at 2 or 3, or whoever it is. We know that Minnesota might be looking to trade down. We know that Golden State might be looking to trade down. So, if you can get up to 1 or 2 and get somebody, fine, but do not give up too much. Do not give up too much. And don't give up Mitchell Robinson. Just don't do it. It's not a good idea. Just don't. Please, Knicks. I'm not even a fan of the Knicks, but I need you to be competent just for once, because then everyone can stop making fun of you. And on that note, that's the end of my New York Knicks season preview. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. That was probably the most animated I've been in on this channel, but this is a topic that gets me riled up sometimes. I don't know why. It's the Knicks. Everybody's got hot takes about them. But that's going to be it for me. We're getting closer to the draft, winding our way up, and we finally got some concrete information on when next season might start. We're ramping up in a full off-season year. So that's going to be it for me today, and I'll see y'all in the next one.